Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Today we're talking about adaptive reuse. Please welcome my next guest. It's David Cochran. He's president and CEO of Pace Properties. Since 1972, Pace has developed over 5,000 multifamily units and over 250,000 square feet of retail. David and his firm have extensive experience with adaptive reuse projects. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate it. And I'd like to know, I mean, you've developed new projects, you've done adaptive reuse. What tends to make you look at adaptive reuse and do so well with it? What leads you there?
I think it's led us there because of the areas of the cities that we target. They're in town, they're infill, and sort of by proxy, it leads itself to typically be an older structure that's on the site. We follow real estate like most people, should, which is location driven. So if there's a building on the site and we like the location, we're always going to first look at the building and say, is this structure keepable? And if it's keepable, and can we repurpose it into something great? But it always has to make financial sense, though. Right. And if if the building's tiny and the best building of all time, that's one thing. But if I'm paying millions of dollars an acre, I can't exactly make money on a 5,000 foot adaptive reuse building. Sometimes the building's just, it's like I said the other day when I was with you, I mean, sometimes you got to take the dog out back and unfortunately put it down. But typically a lot of times if we're looking in locations that we want to be, we're inevitably drawn to the locations that have beautiful structures on them that most often are overlooked by your sort of average real estate, prospector.
Right. And you've gone into some areas fairly early, I think some would say. How has that impacted, what you've done and how these projects have worked out for you?
Well, we always liked to be on the front end of a trend or a trend towards an area. And one thing we've learned is in order to be on the front end of any sort of trend, if you're going to drive that trend, if you're going to drive a sort of resurgence of an area, you can only drive it if your first or multiple deals are impactful enough to drive that trend and influence a change in an area. You can try and be on the front end of a curve and go prospect on a small project, but it's very dangerous because if it's not impactful, it's not going to cause change, and it's got to be impactful truly on a scale issue. I always talk about ripple effects when it comes to real estate. I mean, if you drop a pebble in the water, it's not going to create just one ring. It's going to create concentric circles, and if the pebble's big enough, you can facilitate change in an area. And if you buy enough, then you're on the front end, and therefore you're buying at the right basis. I mean, you've tapped into something is when other development groups piggyback and drive land prices 2x in 6 months, like we've seen on Memorial Drive. Yeah. When we started buying in there, less than $1 million an acre, and it's way over $2 million already.
Right, and for your listeners around the country, that's an area that may have been considered blighted, 5 or 6 years ago, and now it's very popular. So one of the benefits of you being an early adopter in these areas is you're in there at a great basis. But how has it impacted you when you're looking at financing the capital stack and new tenants?
The financing side can be a challenge if it's a up and coming area, or like you said, if it was truly like a blighted area. Blighted might be a little strong, but at the same time, if it hasn't been an area of significant investment on a consistent basis, it's one thing to create a vision that's appealing to your tenants. That's a different game. But the vision doesn't directly correlate to financial underwriting for a bank.
Right.
So it's kind of glove in hand. You create the vision, you get the tenants. Mm-hmm. You get the tenants, you get the loan. That's compelling. Vision and just a selling point, or producing a vision that people can say, oh, I get that, I see that, that's going to be great. That's one thing, but it has to make sense from a financial standpoint. Otherwise, the deal will never happen. So it can be tough, and the vision has to be right. There has to be, if you can't get the leases, there has to be some serious compelling, call it metrics for, being out of balance supply and demand wise. Like we did this massive adaptive reuse in downtown Atlanta, which was a 360,000 square foot office building that had been vacant for 10 years, but it's adjacent to the Hilton Hotel, which is 1,200 units, 1,200 rooms, and it's on the core, main of downtown Atlanta. But we wanted to convert it to residential, and downtown Atlanta does not have residential. On any sort of sizable scale that's for rent. But the metrics of that deal when it comes to rental product versus Class A office space in downtown Atlanta, which is 9 million square feet, and the rental product is less than 500 units,
right?
That's really out of balance with all major MSAs in the Southeast. Banks gravitate to that. They can get that. As long as your numbers work well, then you can get a loan.
That's great. Yeah.
That's a lot of selling.
You got to have that demand. I want to know a little bit more how you get the tenants to have that vision. So stay tuned. We'll have more on adaptive reuse. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Stay with us. Xceligent, the resource professionals like CCIMs, CBRE, JLL, Colliers, and Bull Realty use for market intelligence. Commercial Search is the site to market and find available properties to buy, sell, or lease all over the country. Visit commercialsearch.com. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Today we're talking about adaptive reuse. We have David Cochran here with us with Pace Properties. And David, before the break, we were talking about the vision for the lenders and for the tenants, especially when you're going in an area kind of early where you have a great basis and you're creating a new product, if you will. So tell us a little bit about giving tenants that vision, because sometimes it seems like tenants have their ideas of what things are supposed to do, especially in retail. Yeah. How do you help them get that vision?
Well, I think we create the vision for the project itself. When it comes, we have a lot of projects that are adaptive reuse as well as new construction, sort of combined. But we develop the vision that we think is compelling, and then we package it, and then we just promote it. I think we're very good at promoting a vision in an adaptive reuse scenario that tenants gravitate towards. We've got a track record as well. If it's compelling to a tenant and you solve for your large sort of common sort of issues, which is parking and access and things of that nature, and patio space, tenants typically get it. And in an adaptive reuse, it's a whole different sort of ball of wax when it comes to that vision, because you've already got a kind of a leg up. If the building has character and you're keeping that character, it sets you in a total different realm. And the key to that vision is creating something that's compelling not only to that tenant, but to the competitive set. So in Atlanta and nationally for that matter, you have new construction and you have adaptive reuse. There ain't much in between except for second generation space. Your typical new construction is suited for one tenant, and it's probably going to be more chain or more corporate level. And your adaptive reuse typically, unless it's a massive adaptive reuse, it's going to be typically geared towards your sole proprietor, your locally driven, chef driven concepts. And the competitive set, they if they are looking at a new construction, sort of your standard run of the mill shopping center, and they're looking at ours and the pricing is relatively the same or you're even better, it's kind of a no-brainer. And if you've got a track record to prove that you can pull off the vision, because until you build it, it ain't real pretty in person. You can have renderings and everything, but then you take them to the site and they kind of look at you like you just grew a second head out your shoulder. So
that's right. So is there a little bit of a different draw or demographic when you incorporate adaptive reuse? Might you get a little bit of a younger customer, or might you get a more hip customer, or might you get a draw from a larger area because they want to come see the place?
I think that it kind of depends on the project type. So we do projects, we did a food hall here in Atlanta called Krog Street Market, which I think we'll have over 1 million visitors in our first year, which blows my mind even. That's become a destination for tourists and for Atlanta proper and outside of Atlanta even. People hear about it, they've heard about it, so they want to see it.
Right.
So that's a draw because it's gotten a lot of really good press, and the food offerings are stunning. The people that are drawn, so we heavily curate our projects, meaning we are extraordinarily selective. We look through a very defined lens when it comes to what we want this project to appeal to. I mean, we build our brands for our projects around a meaningful sort of representation of what this project represents to the neighborhood. If it's a neighborhood type destination, we build that tenant base with that in mind, and we don't deviate. If it's, a project like Cross Street Market, it's heavily curated in food. Some of it's packed, like food offerings that you may take home, but most of it is truly eat it while you're there food, and it's chef-driven concepts. It's not chains. So, and then our Larkin on Memorial project, it's literally, we saw a massive dearth of neighborhood offerings for Grant Park, Ormwood, East Atlanta Village even. Where do you go to get your common day-to-day needs? Where do you go buy your light bulb? Where do you go get your produce? And it gives people an opportunity to not have to go to the Publix, the Lowe's, that are in a massive sort of power center environment. Yeah. It gives them a place to go that they feel like is their own as well, because it's in their neighborhood, and they really take ownership in that. Yeah. They know the proprietor. Right. They know that if they have a problem with the product and they take it back, they're going to honor it, and they're going to fix it and make it right. You're not just a number. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My daughter's 19, and if there are any male listeners out there, she has a boyfriend. Okay. But she loves to go to Croc Street. She loves to go to the buildings where it's really cool, and the retailers and the restaurants are more authentic. So it seems to be a real draw, and she'll go a long way for that. Yeah. And myself, as a customer, I don't like to go a long way for anything. It's but she seems to, the place just draws her in. Yeah, it resonates with them. It's authentic. It's and you don't see a lot of that these days. I mean, you're seeing more of it, but it's experiential, and you have a takeaway with it. Everybody goes to dinner at some point in time when you and your wife can't agree on where you're going to go, and your kids are screaming in the back. And you know her? Yeah. I've got one too. And your kids are screaming in the back, so you inevitably end up at a place that's safe, but you don't take away any memories from that. I mean, you walk away and you couldn't tell anybody where you ate the night before because you just did it because you had to eat, because you don't eat, you're going to die. I mean, it's pretty simple. So, I mean, these places where people can visit and have meaningful memories and have takeaways, they're going to return to those places, and they're going to consciously return to them. And if they can sort of service multiple aspects of their lives in it, they're going to go there one day for one reason. They're going to realize that they got all these other reasons to go back there. Right. So one of our projects on Memorial is tagged "Return Every Day," and one of them is tagged like "Neighborhood Shopping Center in Your Backyard." Yeah. So it's. Well, that's interesting that you say we have to eat every day or die. You also know my doctor, apparently. He's told me the same thing. All of us learned it the hard way. Stay tuned. We'll have more on adaptive reuse. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by CCIM Institute, Commercial Real Estate's global standard for professional achievement. Visit ccim.com/CRE show. That's ccim.com/CRE show. Welcome back. I'm Michael Bull, and this is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Today we're talking about adaptive reuse. We have David Cochran here with Pace Properties here with us in Studio One, and you've done a bunch of projects. Have you had any surprises? Anything kind of surprised you after you got this thing going? I think the surprise, adaptive reuse, alternate definition is surprises on the horizon. There's the obvious sort of surprise aspect of it, which is what are you going to find once you start tearing back a building to its kind of core in order to start rebuilding. Those are the surprises that no one likes. Right. But when you find something that you didn't know was going to be there, and it's usually not good when it's a surprise like that. The surprise, usually those are manageable. I mean, you can due diligence the deal to death, and unless it's a surprise like a plutonium stash or even worse, then they're manageable. Good front end due diligence usually. But you've also had some positive surprises. Positive surprises are when you go into something with a sort of a heavily targeted sort of audience and concept, and you can be resolute in what that concept needs to be, but if a better sort of version of that comes along, you can definitely pivot. And we saw that on our Krog Street Market project. I mean, we developed a concept for an adaptive reuse where it was a true market. So I think the first quote I ever had when I did a press piece on it was butcher, baker, candlestick maker. So it was basically all around the spectrum as to sort of what you can take, eat at home, take with you from the standpoint of, home good items and whatnot. But it transitioned after we got our first couple lead restaurant tenants. It just sort of morphed into a true food hall.
And how did that change the rent structure?
It was a lot higher. Yeah, because inherently, I mean, there's risk and return there. I mean, restaurants are a riskier venture than retail. Mm-hmm. But in the space that we're in, which is locally driven, non-chain anyways, the risk is a part of the deal. And frankly, it's an underwritten part of the deal. And when you get a food hall you get a deal like that transitions into a food hall, it does so because there's a snowball effect of demand. And when that happens, yeah, the rents, are driven way up.
Yeah.
And you can get to a point of a glass ceiling on those rents, but the economics of that deal transition in a surprising,
That's a good surprise.
very, very positive way.
So what do you think about the future of adaptive reuse? You think it's going to keep growing? And
we believe in it on a very big level. I mean, we sort of found ourselves in adaptive reuse. It was not like a true business plan. It just sort of happened.
Because you wanted those infill locations.
We were looking at an infill location, and we were going to tear down, the building at Krog Street Market, and the neighborhood politely told us to reconsider, and we did. And I started looking at real estate in a whole different light. I really did. I was a land guy that built new, and I transitioned. So Krog Street is something that the Krog Street Market concept, the food hall concept, is, we beat our heads against the wall, we figured it out, and now we understand it, and we've been doing adaptive reuse ever since, and we're going to keep doing that. Our next food hall is going to be in Charlotte, and then then we got one coming in Charleston, and 2 more pretty much getting ready to go on the data sheet as well. And I think there is a future. I think there will always be a future for adaptive reuse, and it's just, I hope that people will continue to transition to look at buildings first versus land first.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to preserve these structures if you can. I mean, somebody once told me you can't build character.
That's right.
Like immediately.
That's what I keep telling my wife. I've got the character. You can't change me. All right, David, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll put some links to the Krog Street project and some other projects on the show website, so if you want to check those out. And be sure and join us next week. We're going to talk about foreign investment in U.S. real estate. FERPTA changes. There's a lot of changes going on where we're going to have more foreign investment in the U.S. So until next week, be sure that you lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for the Commercial Real Estate Show. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty, commercial real estate asset and occupancy solutions. Visit bullrealty.com. CCIM Institute, commercial real estate's global standard for professional achievement. Visit ccim.com/CRE show. Xceligent, providing verified commercial real estate information across the United States. Visit xceligent.com.